we found a problem. And it was a fairly big problem. This is a lifelong dream coming true, and it's coming true and happening and coming together in a way that is better than I ever expected. And at the same time, I'm gonna try to make it as educational as possible, because I know some of you are watching these videos because you have, the goal of owning a helicopter or even a Blackhawk yourself. I wanna show you how it's done. All right, my friends, welcome back to the vlog, and welcome to the video that many of you, including myself, have all been waiting for. Blackhawk update time. Now listen, this video is something that many of you have been asking for and wanting more details on and trying to figure out just what the status is of the US Army Blackhawk helicopter that I purchased back in June. Now you guys may remember in the last video, we basically left off where we went down to Alabama, picked it up, and delivered it to Thoroughbred Aviation out in Lexington, Kentucky. So since we dropped the helicopter off, Joe and his team down at Thoroughbred Aviation in Lexington have been very, very busy getting to work on it. You see, when you buy something like a Blackhawk from the US government, there's a lot of stuff that goes into being able to use it. That stuff includes tons of maintenance, tons of inspections, tons of paperwork, and just a lot of work in general. So basically the first step in being able to move forward with the Blackhawk was to bring it in for inspection and maintenance, which is what this video is going to be all about. But if you're hungry for even more and you want to be able to see more nitty-gritty details, you can head over to the Thoroughbred Aviation YouTube channel. The link to their channel is in the description below. So as you guys may remember, when we picked the Blackhawk up, the blades were off of it, and there was some parts and pieces that were disassembled to make it easier for transport. So the first thing that Thoroughbred had to do in order to kind of verify the overall condition of the helicopter was put it back together. So that meant they had to put the blades on, they had to put fuel in it, they had to charge the batteries, they had to go through and check all the systems to make sure that it was complete and to make sure that everything was there. So once they had the blades on and they had the whole helicopter assembled, then came the day for them to do the first run-up. That means they're gonna take it outside the hangar and start it up to see what's going on with the engines, the transmission, just to do a full systems check. It ran perfectly. The first run-up was an absolute success with zero issues. Actually, I think there was one tiny fuel leak, not a big deal. They were able to fix that in a very short amount of time. They figured, all right, everything looks good. Now we can bring it back into the hangar and completely tear it down. Now guys, this is where the maintenance gets really, really heavy. We basically decided that we needed to do a PMI 1 and a PMI 2. So what a PMI 1 and a PMI 2 are basically huge inspections. They're inspections that you do every 4 years. It involves essentially tearing the helicopter down to pretty much the nuts and bolts. I mean, you leave the airframe together and you do leave some pieces intact, but the engines come out, blades come off, all the major systems get torn apart and looked into. So as part of that inspection, you go through the engines. So for the engine inspection, what they did is they had the guys up at Timberland Helicopters come down and do their inspection on it. Now, Timberland is a very important name. They are the ones that are putting their stamp of approval and their rules and regulations and guidelines that have been approved by the FAA on my helicopter. All right, I'll explain a little bit more about that once we get into the paperwork side of things. But basically, they worked with Ty and Joe and the guys over at Thoroughbred Aviation, and they tore those things down. They did full inspections, looked inside, outside. They did what's called hot section inspections, and that's very important because a hot section is basically what you're looking at right here. These are turbine blades. What we're checking for inside the engines is the hot section and the compressor. The compressor sits on the front of the turbine and spins and basically pushes pressurized cool air into the turbine, which then turns the turbine wheels. These turbine wheels spin at like 60,000 RPM somewhere. Every engine's a little bit different, but they are spinning really fast under immense amounts of heat, 700 to 900 degrees Celsius. That's hot. That's really, really hot. So what that means is these tiny little fins and blades on the turbine wheels, if they are abused or overheated or mistreated or have particles like dust and foreign materials that enter into the turbine, well, it can nick and damage these wheels, or they can stretch and become distorted, they can become cracked, and any tiny little microscopic imperfection, whether it be a crack, distortion, even discoloration, can mean that you're about to experience a catastrophic engine failure. So this inspection is designed to make sure that there are no imperfections at all in either of the engines, which is always a little bit of a nerve-wracking experience for a helicopter owner, because if there's anything wrong, for example, one turbine wheel can cost you 40 grand. Keep in mind, these engines have multiple wheels. So if there's a problem, it could be 40, 100, 150, 200, $500,000 really, really quickly over something stupid. In fact, this right here is a piece from an engine from one of my old helicopters. It's called a PT support. I sent this engine in for a routine inspection, and they found right here some tiny little imperfections. I'm telling you, like smaller than the head of a needle. That's no good anymore. It will not pass the inspection. We will not give it our stamp of approval, and the helicopter is not safe to fly, so you need to replace that. This one piece was like $35,000.
That's a bad day.
Engines and aviation parts and components in general are not cheap. So with that said, the guys tore into both engines. I was crossing my fingers, hoping for the best, and boom. Both engines came out with flying colors. 0 imperfections, no problems. In fact, they came out better than anybody anticipated. And that was the first sign to us that this Blackhawk is in better condition than we even realized, meaning we believe that the helicopter has never been deployed. According to all the records, the helicopter has spent its whole life here in the United States as a training helicopter for the Army. So like I said, Timberland came in, did their full inspection and said, boom, these engines are both solid. So that was fantastic news for us and a huge hurdle that we had to get out of the way before we could move on to the rest of the inspections. So after the engines were done, the guys at Thoroughbred continued to tear into the helicopter to finish the rest of the PMI 1 and 2 inspections, checking all systems, all components, the transmission, the tail rotor, gearbox, the drive lines, all the parts and pieces. And one of the biggest things they have to check is the actual structure of the airframe of the helicopter. We found a problem, and it was a fairly big problem. Part of the airframe, there is a bunch of different beams and components that are in there that hold the helicopter together. They hold the transmission in, they hold the engines in, and we found that one of the main beams had a crack in it. That means that it either had to be repaired or replaced. Well, Joe at Thoroughbred, he does things the absolute over-the-top best way possible, and he said, we're not gonna repair that. He says, we're gonna go in there and modify it, improve and upgrade it to a bigger, better, beefier, FAA-approved fix that's gonna make sure that this doesn't happen again in the future. So they did that, and after that, my friends, I've got fantastic news for you. Actually, fantastic news for me and my wallet. That was the only major squawk that we found in the entire inspection process. If you're an Army A&P and a helicopter or an aircraft mechanic, and you came across serial number 7923311, I just want to say thank you, because you, my friends, community, group of maintenance guys did a phenomenal job in making sure that this helicopter was in tip-top condition. And I've had a bunch of people reach out to me and a bunch of other owners and operators say, dude, you got a really, really clean ship. Like, that thing is way above average. I'm super grateful for that, because I could have easily gone into this inspection and this maintenance process and ended up, you know, $1 million, $2 million, sometimes $3 million worth of repairs if it's, you know, an engine or a big problem with the blades or transmission, because those big components add up really quickly. So as I'm talking to you guys, we're gonna be inserting all this different footage of the work that was done down at Thoroughbred. Now, these guys were awesome enough to not only do fantastic work, but they also set up cameras and documented the process for us and for their YouTube channel. It took Joe and his team at Thoroughbred, took them roughly about a month to do the whole PMI inspections and the engine inspections and everything that they had to do. These guys are digging through thousands and thousands of intricate, complex parts and pieces and airframe and rivets and all sorts of stuff that was built and installed back in 1979. So after the major inspections were done, the next thing we need to do is start the refurbishment and the modifications and the upgrades that we want to do to the helicopter. During the inspection process, Joe and his team were able to remove approximately 250 pounds of military wiring and electronics. And really, since we're not going to use them, I want to shave off as much weight as I possibly can, even though weight really isn't a big issue when it comes to a Blackhawk, because this thing has the ability to haul approximately 10,000 pounds of weight on top of the weight of the helicopter. So these things are absolute behemoths. The team put the engines back in. They kind of started to reassemble the helicopter lightly, just enough to be able to put it on a truck, and then Joe and his team transported it over to the paint shop, because that's the next step. And so I told Joe that I wanted the paint job on this thing to be perfect. And Joe obviously probably wouldn't let me have it any other way. I mean, everything that they do down there has to be done exactly the right way. It has to be done perfectly. So this means that the helicopter goes into paint for 5 weeks. They have to tape off different areas that are sensitive so the peroxide doesn't get inside the airframe and destroy, you know, the rivets and the seals and stuff like that. So the process of masking the helicopter off just to be able to strip the old paint off is brutal. It takes forever. There's lots of nooks and crannies. You have to disassemble all the cowling, the doors, all the different components, make sure the blades are out and away from there. And anytime you see an aircraft that has not been painted, it's going to look greenish yellow. That's what they call a green aircraft. That's because the primer that they use is green, just looking like a lemon, kind of like a lemon mixed with a watermelon. It's just this crazy bright green color. And that is the primer, which is the step right before you apply paint. So once they have the primer done, they laid down another coat of what's called high build primer, which is basically, it goes on a little bit thicker than the yellow primer, and it helps kind of fill any imperfections. Now we got lucky, like I said, since this helicopter was never deployed, it didn't have any bullet holes, it didn't have any major patches in the skin. Everything was in really good condition. I mean, typically when you see an old Army helicopter or an Army aircraft, there's dents and dings, whether it be from combat or just getting shuffled around the base and tools and people working around them. This helicopter didn't have any of that. It's just super clean inside and out. So that made it a very easy canvas to work with for Jim and his guys over at the Thoroughbred Paint Shop. So right before paint, they apply one more coat of a self-etcher. That's basically a product that goes onto the surface of the primer and makes it nice and grippy and makes sure that whatever paint you spray on it sticks and doesn't go anywhere, and it seals the primer, seals the body of the aircraft, and makes sure that that paint job's gonna last forever. Because if you don't do it this way, the paint job is going to fall apart. So I wanted to make sure that this paint job was, you know, a 50-year paint job. It lasts me for the life of this helicopter. Which brings me to the color. Guys, this was a hard choice. I've gone through a bunch of different colors with my aircraft, and when I originally bought the Blackhawk, I thought, you know, I can do this really cool paint job. Like if you go to Google and search Blackhawk paint jobs, there's some really cool looking civilian, like firefighting Blackhawks that have wild paint jobs. And I was gonna go that route until I started thinking about the essence of the Blackhawk. Like, where did this thing come from? What was it designed to do? What word is part of its actual name, Blackhawk? And so then it came down to my two favorite colors, black or gray. I put a poll up on Instagram, asked everybody kind of what they thought, but black ended up winning. I think it was like 60-40. And I was already leaning towards black, but I didn't want gloss black. I didn't want some flashy color. And this is already a very big, overwhelming presence anywhere that it goes. Whether it's parked in front of my hangar or flying around where we fly, people see this and instantly it just brings too much attention. Anybody who is on YouTube or an influencer or out there with their aircraft and they're showing the world has to deal with this. What I'm getting at is, if I have a lime green Blackhawk flying around and somebody doesn't like my videos, they're gonna say, oh, lime green Blackhawk, that must have been Dave. We're gonna call the FAA. And then that's just more paperwork that we all have to deal with, that it's completely unnecessary, because we fly within the regulations. We fly legally. We spend a lot of time, energy, and money to make sure that we are in compliance with the federal aviation regulations and all of the rules that come along with, you know, owning and operating an aircraft. Overall, being black just helps us kind of blend in a little bit better with the military Blackhawks and the government Blackhawks and the stuff that's out there. So I come from the world of, you know, paint and bodywork and stuff like that. And I know when someone's rushing, and I know when someone's doing an absolute perfect job, and these guys are just doing it. They are just absolutely crushing the prep and getting this thing ready for the best paint job it could possibly get, which is what I got. It's black. So we decided to go with the PPG aerospace paint with about a 30% gloss. So basically it's gonna have a satin finish. I didn't want matte because matte's really hard to maintain and keep clean. I didn't want glossy because glossy doesn't really fit, you know, a military aircraft. I wanted it to have like that menacing, you know, dark look, but at the same time be classy and be something that people would look at and, you know, understand that it's a private helicopter and we're proud of it, and we put a lot of time and energy and money into making sure that this thing looks good, because it's going to go to air shows, it's going to be all over YouTube, all over TV, and it just had to be perfect. So we may add some graphics and decals and different things once we get it back to Utah, but for now, basically the way you see it black is the way that it's going to be flying home when we head out to pick it up, which brings me to my next point. After paint, the helicopter gets loaded back up on the truck and trailer and hauled back over to the main Thoroughbred Aviation facility in Lexington. From there, they are going to start reassembling it.
Thank you for joining us as well. And for families across the country,
where they can start to reassemble it. That means they're going to put the blades on, they're going to install some of the avionics. Everything that we've got in there is going to work perfectly. However, we are going to upgrade to a Garmin 750 GPS unit. We are going to upgrade the intercom system and the radios. So what we're going to do is we're going to add 16 passenger intercoms. And that's about it when it comes to what we're going to do for the dash and the cockpit area. Once we get it back to Utah, we're going to 3D scan the whole interior, and we're going to install Gator Step. Now, you guys know, you've seen the Gator Step that I've installed in some of my other helicopters. This stuff is like the boat flooring, but it is legit. It puts up with literally any abuse, and it gives you a nice foam pad, and it kind of a sound deadening, and it makes it look way better, and it's way more comfortable for passengers, and it quiets everything down, and it lasts forever, and you can do your own designs in it. So that's why the floor looks bare in the videos that you're seeing, but it is not going to be that way once we get it back. We will also have all of the seats installed. It does come with the standard troop seating, which I think is 10 or 11 seats. And there's a good chance we end up getting some new cushions upholstered for those, because right now it's basically just a canvas bottom and a canvas back designed for troops. I do want to make that a little bit more comfortable, but we're still trying to decide on what to do for the upholstery options, because everything that we do and everything that we add makes this process longer. And as you guys can probably guess, I'm really anxious to get this helicopter back home to Utah to start training and flying in it. So the helicopter has to meet its final boss, which is the DAR, Designated Airworthiness Representative. So since this helicopter is no longer owned and operated by the Army, somebody else has to be responsible for it. And that means that Timberland Helicopters, who created the type certificate for it, they're the ones who created the ops manual and the maintenance manual and the program that I am going to put the helicopter on so that we can be compliant. Like I said, to be able to create a type certificate takes years. And Timberland is well known in the industry for having a phenomenal program. They create a manual. We then take that manual and we submit it to the FAA and say, here is our plan, here's how we're going to fly and maintain this helicopter. From there, the DAR, FAA representative, will come down to Lexington, and he's going to do a full inspection. He's going to check the aircraft, he's going to check the maintenance records, he's going to check all the work that Joe and his guys did, he's going to check the Timberland books to make sure that everything is the way it's supposed to be, and that's going to take 2 or 3 days. Once he's done, he's going to sign it off and say, boom, you guys are good to go. And then the helicopter will be moved into what's called the restricted category. There are a few different categories that they fall into. One is standard category. That is basically the category that all the commercial airliners, all the like Robinson helicopters, all the stuff that you see on a regular basis, they fall in the standard category. Then you have what's called the restricted category. Now, restricted category was developed pretty much specifically for military aircraft as they were being decommissioned as far back as like World War II and being sold to the public. So what the FAA had to do was figure out how to create a program that would support the maintenance and the operations of these aircraft, since the military was no longer doing that. And that's where these restricted type certificates from companies like Timberland come into play. Restricted type certificate has a bunch of different regulations around it, and that has rules regarding what you can and can't do with the helicopter or the airplane. You can't just go out and fly passengers around. You can't go fly people around for money. And each program has its own set of different rules. So it's not like one size fits all. The next category is experimental. Experimental is a category that I love. I've played with a lot of experimental aircraft, and the owner is the builder and the factory and the maintenance and everything. So if you buy a kit airplane, like my first helicopter ever was a Rotorway. Little cheap put together kit, home-built aircraft or helicopter, you're responsible for the way that helicopter operates and flies, and you have to create your own manual and own maintenance program that you then submit to the FAA, and they say, yep, that's gonna work, or no, you need to change this and this, and then you're legal to fly. What we're doing with the Blackhawk is we're putting it in the restricted category on the Timberland type certificate, which is going to allow us to do certain things, but we're also going to have the ability to move it into the experimental category. Now, the reason for that is because we are creating what's called a movie manual. A movie manual is something that the owner of an aircraft creates. Picture Hollywood, right? When you see aircraft flying around in Hollywood movies, they are flying under the movie manual, which basically is a program that you write out exactly what you want to do with the helicopter or the airplane, how you want to do it, when you want to do it. Do you want to, have a guy hanging off the skids for a movie from 10 feet off the ground, or do you want to have aircraft buzz the tower really low? Top Gun would be a good example of a movie manual. A lot of the aircraft in that movie had to operate under their specific manual, and since we create videos and motion pictures and all sorts of different media content with this helicopter, the movie manual is what's going to allow us to do those things. We submit a notification to the FAA saying, we're gonna do this, we're gonna go here, we're gonna go there, and we give them a heads up and they say, okay, you're good to go, or no, do it this way or do it that way. So it's constant communication back and forth with the FAA, especially the local office here in Salt Lake City. All the stuff that we're going to do with it, we work directly with them so they know what's going on pretty much all the time. For those of you who understand aviation and these different categories, just know that it's going to be a restricted category, but it's also going to have the ability to go into experimental, and it could bounce back and forth. With that said, maintenance, done. Upgrades, modifications, pretty much done. We're waiting on the final inspection, which should happen here in the next week or so. And once we get that done, then Joe's going to call me and say, hey, come pick up your Blackhawk. And from there, me, JT, and my guys are going to fly down to Lexington, Kentucky, jump in the Blackhawk, and start flying at home. And I cannot wait. That brings me to the next video that we're going to release, which is, what do I have to do to legally fly this thing, me personally? We're going to be doing some simulator flying. We're going to be going to a National Guard base and meeting with their training program to see how they do it. Now, I'm not getting training from the National Guard, but I am becoming familiar with their process and learning how they do it so that I can be as familiar with the aircraft as possible. Because keep in mind, in order for me to be able to fly it, I have to receive all my training and then I have to pass what's called a check ride. And that means that I have to get in the helicopter with a designated FAA examiner and do everything perfectly. From the exterior inspections, the checks, the walkarounds, the pre-start, the startup, the flying, the shutdown. I have to know everything inside and out, and it's a lot. Guys, the systems on these Blackhawks are insane. This right here, this giant book is kind of the operator's manual. This is like the handbook just to be able to start and take off. I kind of got to know this thing inside and out before I'm able to get my license. This is a lifelong dream coming true, and it's coming true and happening and coming together in a way that is better than I ever expected. The helicopter was in better condition than we anticipated. It's cleaner, it's healthier, it has lower time, and overall, I found a good one. And you guys are gonna love what we do with this thing because we plan on doing all sorts of different content, whether it be picking up vehicles out of, treacherous mountains, or, helping with natural disasters, or searching for missing people, or just having fun. We're gonna show you guys what a Blackhawk is really capable of, and we're gonna be able to do things with it that you probably haven't seen done before in, the military or those different operations, because we're gonna be operating under a different standard and a different handbook, and it's gonna be done privately. So buckle up, because this journey is just getting started, and I promise you, it is going to be highly entertaining. And at the same time, I'm gonna try to make it as educational as possible, because I know some of you are watching these videos because you have, the goal of owning a helicopter or even a Blackhawk yourself. I know a ton of you have reached out, and it turns out I wasn't the only one with this on my bucket list. A ton of people would love for this to be something that they could accomplish, and I wanna show you how it's done. Finally, the last thing I wanna say is, one of the main reasons I bought the Blackhawk was because I wanted to give military veterans the opportunity to fly in the Blackhawk, whether it's for the first time or whether they were a door gunner and they've got thousands of hours in them. flying is something that I found most of these guys still want to do. And they want to go up and they want to experience it, and they want to experience it in a way that's not necessarily the way the military does it, because the military is very go here, go there, stay this height, follow this line. Whereas where we're doing it privately, we can be a little bit more flexible and just kind of make it more of a laid back, enjoyable experience. So we're going to be setting up a nonprofit that's going to pretty much allow veterans, we're going to create a program where you can submit your information to come out and fly with us. And I'm going to do that for free. We're not going to charge anybody. We want to do it as a way to say thank you for all the men and women who have served us, and give you an opportunity to get in the helicopter for the first time or get back in it and experience the freedom of flight that you may have experienced in the military. So that is, like I said, one of the main reasons why I bought this. It's one of the main inspirations for me to be able to continue to invest my time and money into it, because the look on someone's face when they jump in a helicopter for the first time, or even for the 1,000,000th time, it's always the same. Just sheer joy, sheer happiness. And that's what I want to try to bring to our veteran community as a thank you for your service, whether you're active duty or veteran. That's going to be the program we put together. So with that said, guys, I'm done talking. Thanks to the guys at Thoroughbred Aviation, I have a ready to fly, fully refurbished, fully inspected, pretty much perfect helicopter. And I want to finally end by saying thank you to Joe and the team at Thoroughbred Aviation. Those guys absolutely dominated. If you need any aircraft maintenance or repair, whether it be a plane or a helicopter, reach out to them. There's a link in my description below. They also have awesome t-shirts, which I think every single one of you should go grab, because they're sweet and these guys are awesome and I stand behind them. So thanks for joining us, and buckle up, because next time you see us, we're gonna be learning how to fly a Blackhawk.